Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Mike McCarthy is producer behind the boards. It was upset weekend last week in the FCS, which only creates huge showdown Saturday matchups for some programs as we set the table for Week 9. Here's a look at what we have on tap for this episode. We're slightly past the midway point of the season, and we'll take a look at some of the standouts from the first half of the year and hand out some awards with what went on last week in college football and what looks to be shaping up in Week 9. We'll take a look at some potential upsets this week in the FCS. And as always, with our new partnership with Stats, we'll preview the FCS Game of the Week in addition to many others. But first, let's get things kicked off by taking a look at some of the key storylines heading into Week 9 as we go into our 4-minute offense. There's a lot going on this week in the FCS. In my opinion, none bigger than what is happening in the Big Sky Conference. Now, it's all great things because there's a ton of strong teams this season jockeying for playoff positioning, but I feel as though we're reaching the point of the year where it's going to be entering playoff elimination territory. You can legitimately make a case for 6 teams in the Big Sky making the FCS playoffs. Obviously, we know that a few will be left out as things continue to shake out as we move forward. But for now, you look at teams like Sacramento State, Southern Utah, and Northern Arizona that have some pretty significant wins on their resume, with Northern Arizona being undefeated and sitting atop of the conference. You also can't forget about the Grizzlies, who still have as much of a say than anyone else in the Big Sky. So as things start to wind down in conjunction with the way other conferences like the Southland and Missouri Valley shake out, we'll see how big the Big Sky will be come playoff time. There are a few surprise teams in the FCS this season. Teams like Hampton, Central Connecticut State, Austin Peay, Columbia, and Nichols, just to name a few. We'll say surprise because you can never really accurately peg what will happen during a wacky college football season. However, what we're seeing from those aforementioned teams is that they are building strong resumes for the playoffs, sans Columbia, obviously, because the Ivy League does not participate in the FCS playoffs. But how good are they is the question. Well, that's why you play the games, right? This week alone, we got some really good matchups that should provide some answers. Central Connecticut State plays St. Francis, Columbia plays Yale, and Hampton travels to Daytona Beach to battle Bethune-Cookman. So, like I said, we'll definitely have the answers we are looking for by the end of the week. The Furman Paladins are playing some outstanding football so far this season. First-year head coach Clay Hendricks has his team 5-3 on the season and on a 5-game winning streak. The key has been a team that has tightened up defensively while still playing dynamic offensive football. With the way the schedule sets up, the Paladins may be playing 3 straight playoff games just to get into the playoffs this year as they face Western Carolina, the Citadel, and Sanford. All are left on the schedule. Now, they can make things very interesting come playoff selection time. As down as the Patriot League has been this season, one team seems to have gotten off the mat and has looked like the team to beat within the league, and that's the Colgate Raiders. Head coach Dan Hunt is one of the more underrated coaches in the FCS and has his Raiders at 4-4 on the season, 2-1 in league play. The Raiders have positioned themselves to take control of the league that has struggled to find consistency from week to week this year. Now, they still have that loss to Lehigh on their record, but they do have a chance to run the table and hope for a Mountain Hawk slip-up. But they can't look that far ahead because they have a big one this week against another team that's in the mix for the league crown in the Bucknell Bison.
I think the FCS gives a student athlete a chance to really develop in the classroom and on the field. And I don't think there's anything that gets in the way of the development of the student athlete. You know, whereas in sometimes other conferences, other levels of play, I think there's some things that could sway a student athlete in a wrong direction here or there. But I think at the FCS level, I think it's all about the student athlete. I think it's all about his development in the classroom and also on the playing field. And it really it keeps your values and your goals right in front of you. And I think there's less things that are going to take you away from those things.
Like we said, the Open last week in the FCS, it gave us some big-time upset. It has definitely changed the conversation about the season moving forward. Well, we're back at it this week with our look at some teams that should be on upset alert here in Week 9. This is an intriguing game because the Tigers are still looking for their first win of the season. They come into Itabena to take on the Delta Devils squad that's coming off of a beatdown of Virginia University of Lynchburg. The Tigers have been in a lot of their games this year, and they are a very young team. I think this is the week that the youth grows up and gets their first victory on the season. Kennesaw State travels to Clinton, South Carolina to take on the Blue Hose, and we've talked all season long about how the Blue Hose are that fly in the ointment team in the FCS, having beaten Campbell, St. Francis, and nearly Charleston Southern last week. So, yes, this game is squarely on upset alert because this is a type of game that the Blue Hose can win. I just don't see them winning it. However, the Owls have that playoff berth in their sights and will do what it takes to avoid the upset. This will be Austin Peay's third opportunity to knock off an FBS foe. They nearly beat Cincinnati in week 1 and lost handedly to Miami of Ohio in week 2, and they now face a red-hot UCF squad that's undefeated and looking to crash the New Year's Day bowl game party. And if the Governors are going to pull off the shocker, their offense must sustain drives, and that'll require their passing game to do more from an efficiency standpoint to accomplish that feat. That's a tall task to ask of a young football team against this squad. I like UCF. Huge game in the CAA between New Hampshire and James Madison. The Wildcats are looking to avenge a playoff loss to the Dukes last season. This UNH squad definitely has a puncher's chance in this game because of the play of quarterback Trevor Knight. His ability as both a runner and as a passer can give a defense fits. The biggest question I have is whether or not the Wildcats have the ability to slow down the Dukes' ground game. It's about being assignment and gap sound against JMU, because if you're not, Trey Sharp and company has the speed to make a house call. Although it may not look like the same national championship team, James Madison is still playing dominant football, especially defensively. I like them to win. We're slightly past the midway point of the season, but it's never too late to hand out some awards and give praise to those that have been outstanding in the 2017 season. Let's take a look at some of the FCS standouts so far this year by handing out some midseason awards. The Walter Payton Award is given to the top offensive player in the FCS, and there is no shortage of candidates for that honor. And we've been privy to some fantastic play by a host of players this season. Alcorn State's running back Delance Turner is the leading rusher in the FCS with nearly 900 yards on the season. Wide receivers Keelan Doss of UC Davis, Nathan Stewart of Sam Houston State, and Elijah Marks of Northern Arizona are all neck and neck for the top receiver spot in the nation. The Buck Buchanan Award is given to the nation's top defender, and guys like Sion Tehuma out of Southeastern Louisiana and Darius Jackson of Jacksonville State, in my opinion, are the front runners. But that's not to say that a bevy of linebackers don't have their say in this conversation. Guys like Garrett Dolan of Houston Baptist, Brandon Bryant of Lafayette, and Brett Taylor of Western Illinois seems to have combined for a zillion tackles on the year. But in all seriousness, those guys are some of the premier defenders in the FCS. The Jerry Rice Award is given to the nation's top freshman, and to me, with what Grant Brenneman is doing at Colgate, it has been phenomenal. The 6'1", 195-pound signal caller has a 12-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio and has his Raiders in the thick of the Patriot League race. There's also a host of guys that are freshmen of influence that are listed here, but also some that aren't, that have been outstanding in their first year of college football. Coach of the Year honors to me comes down to two candidates, Will Healy of Austin Peay and Al Bagnoli of Columbia. What those two coaches have done so quickly at those programs is just remarkable. They should both win it, honestly, if we're keeping it real. Kudos to them and to their staffs who work tirelessly to make it happen. In the Ivy League, they have the Bushnell Cup given to the offensive and defensive players of the year, and this has been an excellent season so far in the Ivy League. Columbia's dynamic duo of quarterback Anders Hill and wide receiver Josh Wainwright are obvious contenders. So is Penn's Justin Watson and Princeton's quarterback Chad Canoff, who's coming off a spectacular performance against Harvard. I think it's been considerably strong within the front seven across the league, and there are a handful of individuals that'll make things very interesting for voters as the season starts to wind down. What's up, FCS fans? This week you can catch me on the broadcast of the Morgan State Florida A&M game in Baltimore, Maryland. This game features two tremendous coaches in Morgan State's Fred Ferrier and Florida A&M's Alex Wood. Both the Bears and the Rattlers are trending in the right direction as they boast two excellent QB talents in Morgan's Elijah Staley and FAMU's Ryan Stanley. And you can find this game on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app, or if you're locally in Baltimore, you can check us out on TV on the Sports Fever Television Network, CW39 and CBS 21 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, WLVT Channel 39 in Philadelphia, and also on ESPN College Sports Extra on DirecTV.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
It's prediction time, folks, and let's dive into some key Week 9 matchups, and we'll start down in Alabama for the Magic City Classic as the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M meet up with the Hornets of Alabama State. This is a big game for both programs as the Bulldogs are looking to close the gap between them and Alcorn State, who leads the SWAC, while Alabama State is trying to string together back-to-back wins. The Bulldogs and Hornets have to hope that their respective passing games can remain mistake-free because both have been very inconsistent this season. I like Alabama A&M in this ball game. Coach James Spade's offense, despite some inconsistencies in the passing game, has the ability to score because of how they're able to control the line of scrimmage. It'll be close because it's a rivalry game, but I like the Bulldogs. Dartmouth travels to Cambridge to take on Harvard. The Big Green are coming off of a close loss to Columbia, and they've played close games all season long. Last week was just the only time they were on the losing side of one of those close matchups. It's tough to get a handle on what's going on with the Crimson this season. Princeton took them to the woodshed last week. Quarterback Chad Canoff had a record-setting day, and I think you'll see the Big Green quarterback Jack Hennigan do the same thing. Look for Dartmouth to bounce back and get a win. Break up the Butler Bulldogs as they are red hot now and rapidly moving up the Pioneer League standings. They have a key game this week against the Dayton Flyers. Now, the Bulldogs have done it with their ground game and strong defensive efforts during this 3-game winning streak. They're also getting great pressure up front on defense. That's the matchup they'll try to exploit in this ball game, as Dayton is not a bad football team overall, but their offensive line has had leakage in the protection department. The Flyers need to win up front, as with the way they are built offensively, they want to control the time of possession with their ground game, so look for Butler to put them in uncomfortable down and distance situations and keep their win streak alive after this one. This is a sneaky trap game for the Duquesne Dukes as they face Sacred Heart. The Dukes are rolling right now, and head coach Jerry Schmidt has done a phenomenal job this season. And I like what I'm seeing from an offense that was a slight question mark heading into the season, turned into a strength. The Pioneers are stout defensively and do an excellent job of turning the ball over. They'll need their offense to stabilize and find their consistency in this game if they want to win. With the way the Dukes defense is playing now, I find that hard to envision. I like Duquesne. Critical Pioneer League matchup between Jacksonville and Campbell. The Dolphins are on a 2-game skid, while Campbell is coming off of a tough loss to Butler. All is not lost for the Camels this season, as they are only 1 game out of first place, but they can't afford another loss in the Pioneer. The Dolphins' ground game was one of the best in the FCS, but in the last 2 weeks, they've been held in check. Campbell is an aggressive team on both sides of the ball that'll be playing with a back against the wall type of a mentality in this game. I like the Camels. Now we start the Big Sky Invitational, as teams will try to separate themselves to strengthen their case for an at-large bid in the FCS playoffs. Sacramento State will try to do just that as they travel to Big Sky leader Northern Arizona. The Hornets are playing some really good football. Quarterback Kevin Thompson may or may not play in this game, but from the looks of it, redshirt freshman Roman Ale can handle the duties just fine. The real key matchup here is between a tremendous Hornets pass rush versus an excellent passing game of Northern Arizona. The Lumberjacks' passing combination of Case Cookus and Elijah Marks are one of the best in the FCS. Now, can that offensive line keep Cookus clean, and can Cookus work more receivers into the offense early to open things up later for Marks? I worry about the Lumberjacks up front on both sides of the ball in this ball game. I like Sacramento State to win there and also win on the scoreboard. Staying in the Big Sky, the other huge game on the schedule this week is Montana at Weber State. Now, the Grizzlies are coming into this ball game well rested and on a 3-game winning streak, winning 4 out of the last 5 games. Their offense is so fun to watch and have made things miserable for opposing defenses all season long. Weber State's offense has done the exact same thing. They beat you up on both fronts. They have a strong running game and work the intermediate passing game really well. The difference here for me is on the defensive side of the ball. The Wildcats are still one, if not the best defense in the conference, and will do a good job of keeping the Grizzlies inconsistent throughout the game. I like Weber State. Probably the biggest game in the Patriot League this week as Bucknell and Colgate meet up. Now the Bison are coming off one of the best finishes this year. A 95-yard pick six to win against Lafayette in overtime has set the stage for them to make a move up the Patriot League standings. For that to happen, they have to put together an offensive game plan that's both efficient and effective against the Raiders. Colgate has quietly been a solid team throughout the course of this year overall. They're getting great play from freshman quarterback Grant Brenneman, and their defense, as usual, has been Colgate tough. I like them in this game as well. To me, Colgate is the best team in the Patriot League and will start to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Monmouth makes the trip to Charleston, South Carolina to take on the Charleston Southern Bucks. I don't understand why the Hawks aren't getting the national respect they deserve, because they've been excellent this season. They're strong along both sides of the line of scrimmage and can beat you in a variety of ways. Don't look now, but the Bucks are right back in the thick of the Big South race, and that makes this a huge game on the schedule. Charleston Southern has won 2 straight games, getting great defensive play and strong quarterback play in the process. I still believe Monmouth is putting something special together this season and will find a way to keep their winning streak going. I like the Hawks. Southern Illinois links up with the Coyotes of South Dakota, and the Salukis are on a 2-game winning streak and is slowly reaching fly-in-the-ointment status. It's been an offensive explosion the last 2 weeks for SIU as they've averaged 43 points a game in those wins. The Coyotes are coming off a tough loss against Illinois State and look questionable on defense, especially against the run. South Dakota is usually one that controls the line of scrimmage but wasn't able to do so last week. Is this a situation where a team allows 1 loss to become 2? I don't believe so, so look for them to regroup and get back on track against the Salukis. Illinois State battles Youngstown State in a key Missouri Valley Conference tilt. The Redbirds are coming off of a big win against South Dakota, and it's because Jake Kolb, the quarterback, was able to minimize his mistakes and the team was able to directly benefit. That's been the case in the wins and losses on the season. Defensively, they've been consistently good when not put in bad situations. They face a Penguin squad that is looking to get out of the month of October. Youngstown State has lost 3 straight games, all in this month, and looks to be free-falling out of the top 25. For them to get back on track, their offensive line has to regain the dominance that we saw from them earlier in the year. This is a huge challenge for them against Illinois State, one in which I believe they'll pass and get the win. I like Youngstown State to win this ball game. They'll further muddy the waters in the Missouri Valley Conference. Staying in the Missouri Valley Conference for yet another big game, we have South Dakota State, Western Illinois matching up against one another, and I feel like the national talk surrounding the Jackrabbits has cooled off just a bit. Right or wrong, this is still a dangerous football team. Tight end Dallas Goddard is one of the best players in the FCS and figures to play an integral role in this ball game. The Leathernecks played a good game last week against North Dakota State, but just didn't make the plays needed to win that ball game. They've been solid in all 3 facets all season, and now they face a quarterback in Taron Christian that is effective on both ends of offense. I can see a path for success in this game for Western Illinois. I just don't know if they have enough, so to speak, to knock off the Jackrabbits. Stony Brook and Richmond meet up this weekend, and the Seawolves are coming off of a bye week and roll into Richmond, winners of 5 of their last 6 games. Where Stony Brook can have some success is on the ground. Running back Stacey Bedell has to be licking his chops in anticipation of facing a Spider defense that has struggled stopping the run all season long. Richmond's offense can't score on anyone. That's not the issue. The issue is if they can get enough stops to avoid a shootout Saturday each and every week. This is a tough matchup for the Spiders, and I fully expect the Seawolves to come in and slowly take the air out of the ball and get the victory. The Phoenix, under first-year head coach Kurt Cignetti, has been on fire all season long. They travel to take on the Villanova Wildcats, who are trying to get back on the winning track. Can Elon win in the trenches will be the key. We know Villanova's foundation is laid on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and they have been very consistent there all season long. Where you have questions is offensively for Villanova. Can they capitalize on the added possessions when their defense gets stops? I just think Elon has now reached a point where they expect to win games and will do so against the Wildcats, getting their 4th win over a ranked opponent. We have a good one in the Southland Conference as the Bearcats travel to Hammond, Louisiana to face the Southeastern Louisiana Lions. Sam Houston State is still an offensive juggernaut in the FCS. Quarterback Jeremiah Briscoe is still one of the best passers in the nation, and Nathan Stewart is going to be a star in this subdivision moving forward. I will always question whether or not they have sustained success against a good defensive team, and that's what we have here in Southeastern Louisiana. It's been a tale of 2 seasons for the Lions as they started out 0-3 and are now on a 5-game winning streak. Now, they enter murderer's row as they play Sam Houston, McNeese, and also Nichols to finish the season. However, there is something to be said about a team that boasts very good athleticism at multiple levels of their defense. That'll definitely give them a chance against the Bearcats. I think we can see an upset here. Sam Houston State has not been stout versus the run. The Lions are one of the best rushing teams in the Southland, and they are also athletic enough on the perimeter to match up in the secondary. I like Southeastern Louisiana. One of the best matchups of the weekend features McNeese State and Central Arkansas. The Cowboys defense is one of the best in the FCS and is coming into this matchup red hot. They're good situationally and also in affecting the pocket. Offensively, I'm a fan of how well balanced they are, and quarterback James Tabari does a good job in operating well in the red zone. The Bears are very similar in what you see from McNeese State. Their offense might be just a bit more explosive. Hayden Hildebrand has been great this year, and on defense, they have one of the best defenders in the FCS in Tremont Smith. When you have a game that features two Titans like this, you instantly want to go to the battle in the trenches. To me, that's where I have to give the edge to Central Arkansas. I think they can win this game based off how good they are up front. I'm taking the Bears. Two young talented teams in the FCS meet up in an Ivy League tilt. The Columbia Lions and Yale Bulldogs have been the talk of the Ancient Eight, and rightfully so. You saw two excellent recruiting classes last season get a ton of game reps, and now it has paid off as both are combined 11-1 on the season. Now, the obvious one loss belongs to Yale, as Columbia is undefeated and looking to keep it that way. They've done it with great defense and a playmaking offense. They've also done it with special teams as well. Yale's quarterback Kurt Rawlins is playing lights out right now, completing 70% of his passes and averaging 236 yards passing a game. Defensively, the Bulldogs front seven is one of the best in the conference. Matthew Oplinger is one of the most talented outside linebackers in the FCS. Now, this game will come down to whether or not Yale can get off the field defensively. Columbia doesn't necessarily have a running game to speak of, but they can make do with their passing game's ability to attack short to deep down the field. As good as Yale's defense has been this season, I think Columbia's may be situationally better. That'll be the difference. I like the Lions. Another good one this week in the MEAC as Hampton battles Bethune-Cookman. The Pirates have played good all-around ball this season, and it shows in their unblemished conference record and 5-2 record overall. The balance on offense has been a welcome addition to the Pirates season. It's kept their defense fresh as they are sustaining drives and are doing a great job inside the red zone putting up points. Bethune-Cookman gave North Carolina A&T all they can handle last weekend. They have to get better inside the red zone. That's paramount in this ball game. Their style of play actually yields itself to close games, and that'll be the case once again here against Hampton. I like the Wildcats secondary, but I think they'll have an issue up front against Hampton. I like the Pirates ground game to be the reason why they go to Daytona Beach and get the victory. It's time for our Stats FCS Game of the Week preview, and this week we travel out to Fargo for a big game in the Missouri Valley Conference where the Bison of North Dakota State play host to the Northern Iowa Panthers. Let's take a look at some coaching points in this ball game, and starting with Northern Iowa, it's about maximizing your offensive possessions. When you face a team like North Dakota State that can do a really good job offensively of owning the time of possession, you have to maximize your own offensive possession when you get the football. So whether it's flipping the field position or coming away with points, whether that's 3 or 7, you have to be able to maximize if you want to have a chance. You also can't beat yourself. You have to avoid those mental mistakes because those will become physical mistakes in the form of penalties and blown assignments. So you have to play a clean game without penalties, without turnovers if you want to win. And speaking of winning, it's about winning on first down defensively. You want to put this North Dakota State offense in backed up situations to where it becomes a passing game. If that happens, that heavily favors Northern Iowa in my opinion. Moving over to North Dakota State in this ball game, I think they have to play winning special teams. I love what Northern Iowa brings to the table in the special teams department, especially in the return department. So if you're North Dakota State, force those guys to fair catch the football. Don't give them any half a field to work with. Win that aspect of the game, and it'll help you win the game as a whole. And moving Eli Dunn off the spot defensively will require pressure. And that's one thing I think they can do well is apply pressure on the quarterback, because you don't want to give him the same launch pad spot every time he drops back to throw the football. If they can do that, it really limits the passing game of Northern Iowa. And those receivers for North Dakota State have to be able to make plays on the outside. Northern Iowa will challenge North Dakota State to beat them throwing the football, and that falls right into the shoulders, into the laps of those receivers on the outside having to make plays. Offensively, one of the biggest X factors in this game for Northern Iowa is wide receiver Darius Fountain. I love the way this guy plays the game. He's a physical receiver at 6'1", 210. And if he can win those individual battles one-on-one on the outside or over the middle of the field, I think it bodes well for Northern Iowa's chances. Defensively, linebacker Ricky Neal and what he can do from a totality standpoint. He's a guy that can bring a lot of pressure. He's also going to be a factor versus the run. He has to make sure to keep Easton Stick in check because we know he loves to get outside the pocket and create things with his legs. And speaking of Easton Stick, I believe he's the biggest X factor offensively for North Dakota State. His dual threat capability causes a lot of problems for opposing defenses. They kind of struggled last week against Western Illinois, but Stick's game was able to rise to the occasion, and he kept his team afloat and got them out of there with the victory. So if he can be the biggest factor like he was last week, it also helps him out moving forward. Defensively, I look at Trey Dempsey. I think Northern Iowa will try to test his secondary deep down the field, and that's where a guy like Dempsey will come into play. He's a good combo safety. He can play up in the box. He can play outside on the corner, but I think his free safety skills will be on display in this game, and he has to step up big and make plays. I like North Dakota State in this ball game. This is a team that's battle tested. They're well balanced on offense. Defensively, they can get after the quarterback, but also can stop the run equally as effective. I just don't see a path for success for Northern Iowa in this ball game unless a complete collapse by North Dakota State. That won't happen. And yes, these games are normally close, but I just think right now this year, the Bison are just too strong to lose to Northern Iowa at home. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts. And don't forget to check out and subscribe on iTunes to the FCS Opening Drive podcast, where David Hashagen and myself will break down this week's games and also take a look at some other intriguing storylines that's going on in the FCS. And always remember to check out our FCS Conference Whip-Arounds, where our FCS correspondents will bring you around the FCS, breaking down the key storylines, games, and matchups of the upcoming week.